Welcome to this series of readings of the Mechanization concept, a manifesto by the Great Divine Director. There are 22 parts to these releases by the Great Divine Director. He has asked that they be read in the order of their release. I am Caroline Hansky, the reader. The teachings were given by the Great Divine Director through the messenger Mark L. Prophet in 1965. Permission was granted for reading them and making them available to the general public in audio form. These readings are from Mark and Elizabeth Prophet, The Mechanization Concept, The Mysteries of God on the Creation of Mechanized Man, Pearls of Wisdom, Volume 8, Teachings of the Ascended Masters, Summit University Press, copyright Church Universal and Triumphant, 1965. They are also published as Mark L. Prophet, the Soulless one, Cloning a Counterfeit Creation. Copyright 1965, 1980, 1981, Summit University Press. Why would you want to listen to and or read these releases? Because the message in them is as important now, or even more so, as when it was originally delivered. The message is serious and ought to be taken seriously. The mechanical, non-human creation, not created by God ones, are among us and have been for thousands of years. We have taken on their consciousness to some degree and must free ourselves from it. Prayer and working on our psychology are two ways of doing this. But first we must be aware of what the mechanical consciousness is. These releases by the Great Divine Director are for this purpose. What makes this so relevant at this time? If you are following the news of the development of robots for every conceivable purpose, then is it not curious that this is made to seem a new development? As these current robots are portrayed, they are obviously mechanical. Yet, just as obvious from the Great Divine Director teachings is the fact that the robots that have been on the earth for thousands of years appear like humans. We don't know the difference. Then why is it important to make us think this is a new advanced development? Something to ponder. The Great Divine Director is a cosmic being with many offices in the spiritual hierarchy. For example, he is a member of the karmic board in which he represents the first ray of God power. He is known as the Great Divine Director because he has merged his consciousness with the cosmic cycles of God's divine plan for untold universes of light. Great Divine Director is a title of an office in the cosmic hierarchy, given to the one who, by virtue of diligent application over the eons, focuses within his causal body the formula of the ascension for the children of God and the sons and daughters of the Most High evolving in this cosmos. The causal body is the spiritual part of us in which is stored our attainment, all merit we have ever accrued, our treasures stored in heaven. The Great Divine Director's causal body is a giant blue sphere that surrounds the entire planet. Thus his attainment of cosmic consciousness qualifies him to ensoul the flame of divine direction on behalf of Earth's evolutions and untold lifeways beyond. The Great Divine Director long ago passed those initiations that placed him at cosmic levels of service and qualified him to become the Manu of the seventh root race. A Manu embodies the archetype for an entire life wave of souls who will incarnate on Earth at a certain period, including the divine image and likeness out of which they are made and the pattern of their destiny. The seventh root race is destined to embody first in South America under the Great Divine Director, and so he presides spiritually over the continent of South America. He is then the lawgiver and sponsor of the seventh root race, the one who holds the blueprint for the entire race of the souls who begin their embodiment in the age of Aquarius that is now dawning. Godfrey Ray King, author of the book, The Magic Presence, describes the Great Divine Director in it. This majestic being stood fully 6 feet 4 inches in height, with wavy hair that fell to his shoulders and looked like sunshine on gold. His robes glittered with points of light like jewels that flashed continually with the tremendous radiance of the power held under his control and obedient to his conscious direction. The girdle encircling his waist was a mass of sapphires and diamonds. From it hung a panel to a few inches below the knees. This also was a mass of jewels. End of quote. The great divine director has said, I pray that you will call to me, for I have within my consciousness the scroll of the divine plan for every living soul on Terra and in the vast beyond. The Mechanization Concept, a manifesto by the great divine director, Part L, Law. On behalf of the children of God's creation, I am the advocate of the judgment of the law upon the violent, who would wrest the secrets of nature from the hand of God to become as gods, manipulating life electronically, controlling mankind by their arts and artifices, thus affecting the temporary separation of souls from the inner science and the inner religion by the monstrous mechanical doctrine. Now let us open the golden book of eternal wisdom, bearing in mind that one day with God is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day. Blessed ones, there is no eternal chaos. There is only eternal order in manifestation. And the marvelous wisdom that expresses throughout the cosmos is a flower whose cup holds all of creation within its airy fragrance. There are many things that can be analyzed and broken down into component parts. Eternity is composed of segments of moving consciousness labeled time. The mighty flow of cosmic energy composing the physical body of the universe, for all of its intricacy, is a manifestation of simplicity. And no doubt you have noted that there are many wonderful things in the world which, when taken apart, piece by piece, lack the beauty of the unified whole. We understand the role of science in probing both atom and cosmos. Without theorizing and experimentation, there is little question that man would be in a more primitive and rudimentary state at the present hour. Nevertheless, it should not be denied that all of the wonders of material science cannot be compared to the birth of a child. The wonder withal is the miracle of life, the miracle of consciousness, the miracle of being. The Master Jesus so wondrously stated as he passed through the fields of waving wheat, the Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. Therefore the Son of Man is Lord also of the Sabbath. We declare then that man was not made to be a servant to a mechanical system or regimen, but that these systems are the means, however inferior, used by him to implement his search for the freedom of the golden ages. So-called fables of the Arabian Nights and other wondrous tales told by mankind have their root origin in many cases in great cosmic truth, for in the elder days of spiritual artistry, mankind were able to produce food and necessities which were instantaneously called forth by the power of precipitation. This hidden memory has caused mankind to go in search of the miraculous. Writings, music, and folklore contain various examples of man's longing to see the magic of his faith burst forth into manifestation, even in the physical octave. There are several factors at work behind the cause of man's original loss of his spiritual faculties, but in the history of the cosmos, as pertains to the planet Earth, we clearly see that following the downfall of man, various individuals from other systems of worlds did come to the planet Earth. These beings embodied a laggard state of consciousness, which had already begun the nefarious activity of controlling the electronic pattern behind the screen of mortal manifestation, and of dissecting the universe, as the violent sought to wrest the secrets of nature from the hand of God and use them to their own ends. The first fall, then, was one of ethics and morals, for it was in man's concept that through mastery of nature he would be able to circumvent God, thus giving him power over God's substance, that the original fall came about. Did not the serpent boast, "Ye shall be as gods"? When the ethic of man falls, when ideals and patterns of humility typified in the words, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge," are denied preeminence in consciousness, it is ever so easy for individuals to feel that they are a law unto themselves. Long ago, then, in another system of worlds, this descent of consciousness, this defection from acknowledgement of the supremacy of the Godhead, occurred to many. Out of this laggard flow, certain advanced beings did train and employ artisans who were skilled in the manipulation of material substance. The story of this event is hidden in the generic recordings of the Bible. These also indicate how Jubal and Tubal-Cain and others did come into embodiment and did teach mankind their arts. Let it be clear that the early race of mankind were in direct contact with the ancient records of this extraterrestrial activity practiced by beings from other worlds, and thus mankind became imbued with the selfsame spirit of these artisans, who began to control them and impart to them their ideas of the physical mastery of material substance. Now, lest I be considered uneducated, and I smile with beloved Amoria as I say this, let it be clear to all that we do not question the ability of mankind to learn from these artisans and to profit materially from the knowledge imparted unto them. Workers in brass and metals came forth, tooth and gear, weights and pulleys, levers, balances and counterbalances, electronic flow and electronic control, all were developed in due process of time. Dependent then on outer sources of supply and outer wisdom, mankind leaned less and less upon the inward power of nature and nature's God. Harnessing then the stream of nature's energy in accordance with the knowledge of control which they evolved, mankind constructed factories, mines, buildings, modes of transportation, and all of the accoutrements of science. As mankind's wonder about science increased, many became so enamored with the outer modus operandi of the physical world that the inner activities of the soul were totally neglected, to the point where mental illness was spread abroad throughout the land. By reason of his isolation from his God source and the karmic action which ensued, man sensed the gradual waning of his life force and shouted in desperation for his plight, "Let us eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die." Well, all of this outer activity has been increasing throughout the world until ancient prophecies are now fulfilled in the horseless chariots, the great bird-like planes of the air, and modern weapons of war. The involvement of civilization in matter and materialism has become increasingly great. The consciousness and ego of man, then, has been made a battleground of divergent energies instead of the building ground of eternal verities. As the worth of man's soul was lessened in his own eyes through personal degradation and his expulsion from paradise, man's own heart yearnings were translated into religious searching and the relentless pursuit of God in the desire to return to the paradise estate which he had lost. But even this wonderfully redeeming factor, brought about through man's search for personal atonement for all the foregoing misappropriation of God's purposes in life, has been exploited by those who would make religion a source of livelihood and soul expansion a mechanical process. Do you wonder, dear people of Earth, that in all that has happened in the past to the people of this planet, all that is their history, God himself continually strives to elevate his blessed creation and extricate it from this mass confusion? God did not ordain, nor does he maintain, the battering energies which mankind have fabricated into the impersonal webs of finite illusion to which they are subjected. I have raised the question here in order that I might expand on the meaning of life from the standpoint of God truth. Now, ignorance and fear are the tools used by the forces of negation to cause men to vegetate in the human estate without entering into the divine. My release on the monstrous mechanical doctrine is intended, through the means of altered perspective, to bring a feeling of freedom and release, whereby joy to the world is amplified daily as man goes his rounds in the pursuit of happiness. Through custom and habit, men have sought their pleasures and happiness in that dimension of consciousness which is most familiar to them. The spectrum of consciousness in the finite world is not expanded sufficiently to allow men the full measure of happiness for which they yearn and which was originally theirs. Some of the students are aware that when it became necessary to restrict mankind because of his viciousness and bestiality, the Lords of Karma did cut the allotment of cosmic energy for many life streams upon the planet, until the stream of life flowing into the body of man at the top of the head, which had once been the size of the tube of light, became a very narrow cord of silvery light substance through which a relatively minute portion of energy could flow. Because there is a relationship between the apportioned size of the life stream, or silver cord, and the spectrum of consciousness upon which man's awareness vibrates, the reduction in the actual size of the cord caused a corresponding decrease in the number of years of the allotted lifespan of mankind, as well as a gradual shrinking of the spectrum of consciousness. You will recall that in the days of Methuselah, men did live to be many hundreds of years old. Then the shrinking of the rate of descending energy was reflected in a shrinking of the lifespan, together with the aforementioned spectrum of consciousness. In a practical manner, this meant that the vibratory peaks of happiness, which could be experienced by man, and those of consciousness and of awareness, were also diminished. And while, through the power of various spiritual exercises, mankind have been able to expand their consciousness, the physical vessel of man and his brain structure have continually impeded the flow of the vital essences because of the shrinking of the cup of consciousness. Let it be increasingly clear, then, that we do not desire to despair of the necessary mechanics of civilization, but rather of the use to which men have put these mechanics, and most specifically, the use to which they have put their minds and attention. Various forms of neurosis and psychosis, diseases of the mind and nerves, are the consequence of the fast pace of civilization and man's inability to cope with environment as it continues to hedge him in with the bristling needles of torture created by his inhumanity to his fellow man. But mankind could be spared all this by turning wholeheartedly to God for illumination and strength. The beloved Master Saint Germain, acting under our direction, has continually requested that the flame of freedom be expanded in men and women as courtliness and grace. I far prefer that grace of manner which comes naturally from within, a loving heart, to that which is merely the repetition of certain norms of social etiquette. All in all, there is a great deal more to life than meets the eye, and the horrible pauperizing of life by the powers of the age of iron and steel through misapplication of the law has brought mankind to his knees in anguish. Now we are releasing a vital information that will enable men to change these untoward conditions. As principle becomes applied knowledge, it is my intent in the near future to discourse on man and to raise the curtain on certain uncommon points of knowledge concerning the elements of his being. Remember, blessed ones, the authenticity of our releases is like the sounding of a great bell, which resonates within the soul of those who possess the capability of attuning with the joy of heaven and with the ascended Master's willingness to release their vital energies into the stream of human consciousness. The goal of heaven is clear. It is to enlarge that consciousness and the borders of man's perception, that he might live in the fullness of that life which God in the beginning intended him to have, to hold, and to cherish. When the goals of heaven become the goals of men, then the inrush of the kingdom of God will become a reality for mankind, bringing meaning to life, which is lacking when the purposes thereof are misunderstood and perspective cannot be drawn in honor and truth, because it remains effectively warped by the lens of mankind's limited vision. Let men perceive the need to adjust, to correct, and to vitalize, and then I think there shall be less meandering along the streamless idling of the mighty engines of life, and a harnessing of universal love and its power to fructify and sanctify all that men shall do. I remain your advocate of freedom, the great divine director.